Well, look, under my government, one of the 5 things we have to do to grow the economy in New Zealand is to have deeper international connections around trade and investment. And my first 12 months has been actually out on the road making the case that New Zealand's open for business. We won't get rich just selling stuff to each other back at home in New Zealand. And so, we want to be out and about in the world, and a quarter of all of our jobs are tied back to trade. The companies that export pay 7% higher levels of wages and salaries, and so it's in our interests as a small trading nation to build and develop relationships wherever we can. And the UAE is a fantastic like-minded country partner as well, and so it's a real privilege to be here today to be able to witness that signing.
Well, let's look at what the CEPA can do for that. What tangible difference is taking 5% off exports going to make?
Well, what it means for us is that all of our exports will, from day one, essentially when the agreement comes into force, lose 98.5% of all the tariffs that are applied here in the UAE. Obviously, for UAE products coming into New Zealand, it's 100% taken off immediately. And I appreciate that the UAE's always had relatively low levels of tariffs, but all of that is just adding cost or barnacles on the boat or on the waka, as we would say at home, that just slow businesses down, that makes it a disincentive to actually export and to look at other markets instead. And we know that this is a huge market that has good potential for New Zealand with high value products and services, particularly with a region that's importing 90% of its food. Food security becomes very important, but there's also huge other areas around our interest in renewables. Obviously, we're one of the top 5 countries in the world with respect to 88% of our energy being renewable, and there's huge opportunities for us to collaborate in those spaces as well.
Okay, well, we'll dig into the different investment areas, but on the export front, how do you use the CEPA to convince New Zealand companies to prioritise the Gulf rather than expanding into Asia, expanding into China?
Yeah, well, that's partly what my job is to make sure that I get the top-to-top settings right between our 2 countries, and then to be able to come back home and to be able to bring further delegations and trade visits through here, which will be our intention. So we actually build literacy and understanding of the market as well, and how New Zealand products and services would be tailored to deliver into a market like this. But really it's about, we've got fantastic people at home who are, fantastic entrepreneurs, and it's just making sure that any irritants or impediments or that we can remove, we can. But equally, it's about attracting inbound investment into New Zealand as well. And so obviously Abu Dhabi, with its large sovereign wealth funds, who I've spent time with meeting today, also have areas of interest around investing in renewables, investing in core infrastructure. And those are things that my government really is open to international pools of capital to help us accelerate the development of New Zealand as well.
You mentioned the barnacles there, because it's not just tariffs, it's non-tariff barriers as well. What kind of non-tariff barriers do you think are going to make a difference here?
Yeah, look, we sort of work those through, and every year there's probably been, last year I think we worked through about $700 million worth of non-tariff barriers with different relationships we have with countries around the world. Here that really hasn't been too much of a challenge for us. It's a place that is similarly minded to us as agile, small countries that believe in trading and actually work together very well. And so for us, it's about, now we've got this formal architecture between us with the CEPA agreement and the Bilateral Investment Treaty, that actually is an opportunity now to make sure that it gives us the architecture we need to deepen and broaden that relationship.
Okay, well, let's talk about the BIT. As a new government, you've got an infrastructure pipeline of around $120 billion. Someone's got to pay for it.
Yes.
Where do you see UAE money playing a role in that?
Well, look, we talked about that with some of my meetings already today, but there is real expertise sitting here in the UAE, for example, on core infrastructure, whether that's about the building out of renewable energy, for example, is an area where we want to double the amount of renewable energy in New Zealand. It's very important to us to make the transition that we want to make and to power up our economy in the right way. We have roads that need to be built. We have 3 water infrastructure that needs to be built and processed as well. And there's a lot of expertise and capital obviously sitting in this part of the world that actually could come and co-invest with New Zealand enterprises at home. And we're very up for using that capital in order to get the infrastructure pulled forward and built much quicker, and so that the benefits can flow economically, socially and environmentally through to New Zealanders. For
a man who's hopped off a plane at 4 o'clock in the morning, meeting with a bunch of sovereign wealth funds, you've done well already. Who have you been speaking to?
We've met with representatives from Mubadala, we've met with ADIA and ADQ, and again, there's huge opportunities between the 2 countries when we think about where there is actually complementary skills where we can also assist here, as well as obviously them assisting us in New Zealand.
Any of the big companies, any of the oil and gas majors?
Yeah, look, we've met with people from ADNOC and also Mazda. Obviously, Mazda is interesting to us because we're 88% renewable energy already, and we want to be able to explore more opportunities in geothermal, solar and wind as well.
New Zealand technically dropped into recession in Q3. What's the plan that involves trade for turning that around?
Yeah, actually, New Zealand's been through a very tough time in the last few years. Actually, it's been essentially in a recession for the last 3 years, and so for us, it's really about making sure we have to fix up some of the financial government spending. We've got inflation coming down, we've got interest rates coming down. We obviously need to see economic growth and employment come down a little bit more. But the real opportunity is to grow New Zealand, and that really comes back to building out a world-class education system, embracing more science, technology, innovation, getting rid of the red tape, and making sure that we build our infrastructure and obviously stronger international connections. And those are the big 5 things that we're pretty excited about, and that's why we're here today, to make sure if we build a bigger economy, that's ultimately how we get better education system, a better healthcare system, and a big part of that is export and investment.
New Zealand's quite unique in that it's signed an FTA with the Gulf recently, November, as well as the CEPA. How do the two of those coexist? Which takes preference? How does it work?
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously we kicked off the GCC conversation in February once we came to power. It had been talked about in some form or another, I think, for over 15 years. And we've moved forward through that, but we've moved forward through even quicker with the UAE. And we kicked that off in May and we finished that out in September. So, they'll work together in quite a complementary way. It just means that we have collectively been able to beef up our exposure into this market and actually make sure that we're setting up the conditions so that New Zealand entrepreneurs and investors from the UAE can actually do business together. And once we get the flows of trade and capital and information and people-to-people connections, that's what creates opportunity for both our countries.
These agreements come at a time when we've got the Trump administration coming in the US, bringing more tariffs, more barriers to trade. Do you see that changing trade flows? Do you see any sort of sea change in terms of who trades with who coming out of this?
Look, I think in fairness, we'll need to see President Trump and the new administration take its formation and shape, and what's been talked about and what actually gets actioned, we'll need to see and understand that. For New Zealand as a small trading nation, the international rules-based system, the freedom of navigation, sovereignty of nation states, unimpeded trade is actually a key cornerstone of how we've actually built our country and our economy. We work very closely with other like-minded countries like Singapore, like the UAE, that have a very similar outlook on the world, and we'll continue to advocate very strongly for that. But obviously, yes, there's a new US administration coming into power, and I'm very confident we'll be able to work incredibly well with the new administration as well.
Dubai Eye 103.8.
Join the conversation.